The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the basement hallway of the Chicago Palmer House Hotel. It was 3:27 in the morning on November 8th, 1978, and Johnny Cash couldn't sleep. The Man in Black had just finished his second sold-out show at the Chicago Theater. 2,800 people had been on their feet for 2 solid hours, singing along to Ring of Fire and I Walk the Line, until their voices went hoarse. But now, alone in his hotel suite, the familiar demons had returned. Johnny paced the ornate carpet of his penthouse room, his weathered hands shaking slightly. The prescription bottles on his nightstand caught the city lights streaming through the windows. Pills that promised sleep, but delivered only hollow numbness. He'd been clean for 6 months this time, the longest stretch in 5 years. But tonight, the weight of his past mistakes pressed down like a physical force. "June's asleep," he whispered to himself, glancing at his wife curled peacefully in the king-sized bed. "Don't wake her. Don't make her worry again." So Johnny Cash did what he'd done countless times before, when the darkness threatened to swallow him whole. He walked. He slipped on his black leather boots, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the elevators, seeking solitude in the hotel's empty corridors. The elevator descended past the lobby, past the conference floors, all the way down to the basement service level. Johnny had discovered these industrial hallways during previous stays, a place where a famous man could disappear, where the harsh fluorescent lighting matched his inner turmoil. As the elevator doors opened, he heard something unexpected. Singing. A voice, rich and melodious, echoing off the concrete walls. But not just any singing. This was Folsom Prison Blues, his own song, being performed with an aching authenticity that made Johnny's breath catch. He followed the sound down a narrow corridor lined with industrial laundry equipment and maintenance supplies. The voice grew stronger, more beautiful with each step, and then Johnny saw him, a man in his early 60s wearing a faded maintenance uniform with Miguel embroidered on the pocket, was mopping the floor with practiced efficiency. His silver hair was neatly combed despite the late hour, and his weathered face showed the kind of dignity that comes from honest work. As he mopped, he sang Johnny's song with perfect pitch and surprising emotional depth. But here's what stopped Johnny Cash in his tracks. Miguel was singing in Spanish. Every word of Folsom Prison Blues had been translated, and the lyrics flowed with the same raw power as the original English version. Johnny stood frozen in the doorway, mesmerized. When Miguel finished the verse, he seamlessly transitioned into what sounded like Portuguese, then French, then something Johnny couldn't identify at all. "Excuse me," Johnny said softly, not wanting to startle the man. Miguel looked up, and his eyes widened in recognition. But instead of the usual star-struck reaction Johnny had grown accustomed to, Miguel simply nodded respectfully and said in perfect English, "Mr. Cash, I hope I wasn't disturbing anyone. Sometimes the music helps the work go faster." "Not disturbing at all," Johnny replied, stepping closer. "That was my song you were singing, but I've never heard it like that before. How many languages was that?" Miguel set down his mop and smiled. "Just 4 in that verse, sir. Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Italian. I was working my way through all the languages I know. Your song, it translates beautifully. The pain, the regret, these are universal feelings." Johnny's jaw tightened. Here was a janitor in a hotel basement who understood his music better than most music critics ever had. "How many languages do you know, Miguel?" 9, sir. Spanish is my first language from Mexico, but I learned English when I came here 32 years ago. Then Portuguese from my Brazilian neighbors, French from night school, Italian from the kitchen staff upstairs, German from reading philosophy books, Russian from a chess partner, Japanese from my daughter's college textbooks, and Hindi from the meditation center where I volunteer. Johnny Cash, who had performed for presidents and prisoners, who had sung duets with the greatest artists of his generation, stood speechless. Here was a man who cleaned floors for a living, yet possessed a gift that most people never dreamed of developing. "Miguel," Johnny said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Would you sing my song again, in all 9 languages?" What happened next would become the stuff of legend in the music industry, though it would take years before the full story emerged. Miguel nodded and began to sing Ring of Fire. He started in Spanish, his voice carrying the same passionate fire that had made the song famous. Then he moved to Portuguese, the melody taking on a different rhythm, more samba-like, but equally powerful. French brought elegance and sophistication. Italian added operatic flourishes that sent chills down Johnny's spine. When Miguel reached German, his pronunciation was so precise it sounded like he'd studied at the University of Berlin. Russian transformed the song into something that sounded like a folk ballad from the Siberian countryside. Japanese brought a hauntingly beautiful restraint that emphasized every emotional beat. Hindi gave the song a spiritual quality that made Johnny think of ancient prayers. And then Miguel returned to English for the final verse, but now Johnny heard his own words as if for the first time. The love, the burning passion, the surrender to something greater than yourself. It was all there, magnified by having heard it through 8 other cultural lenses. When the last note faded, both men stood in silence. Johnny's eyes were wet with tears he didn't try to hide. "Miguel," he said finally, "how long have you been working here?" 12 years, sir, night shift, Sunday through Thursday." "And before that?" Miguel's expression grew distant. "I was a professor of linguistics at the University of Mexico City, specialized in comparative language structures and cultural translation, but my wife got sick, and we needed better medical care, so we came here. The hotel job, it pays for her treatments. It's honest work." Johnny's heart broke and soared simultaneously. Here was a man who had sacrificed his career, his recognition, his entire professional identity to care for someone he loved. And yet he'd never lost his gift, his passion for the beauty of language and music. "Where is your wife now?" Johnny asked gently. "She passed 2 years ago," Miguel replied simply. "But I stayed. This place, these hallways, they've become home. And the night shift lets me volunteer at the meditation center during the day. I teach English to new immigrants. Language, Mr. Cash, is the bridge between souls." That phrase hit Johnny like lightning. Language is the bridge between souls. Here was a man who'd lost everything but found meaning in service, who'd maintained his dignity in the face of devastating setbacks, who'd turned his gift into a tool for helping others. Johnny made a decision that would change multiple lives forever. "Miguel, I'm recording a new album in 2 months. I want you to be part of it." Miguel shook his head. "Mr. Cash, I appreciate the kindness, but I'm not a performer. I'm just a man who loves languages, and that's exactly what I need," Johnny insisted. "I've been thinking about recording some of my songs in different languages, but I needed someone who understands not just the words, but the soul behind them. You don't just translate, Miguel, you transmute. You find the emotional core and rebuild it in each new language." What Johnny proposed was unprecedented in country music. He wanted to record an entire album of his greatest hits, with each song performed in multiple languages, with Miguel as his linguistic consultant and featured vocalist. But here's the part that left everyone truly speechless. Johnny didn't just offer Miguel a recording contract, he offered him something far more valuable: recognition. He insisted that Miguel be credited as co-producer and cultural consultant. More importantly, Johnny wanted to establish a foundation in Miguel's name to help immigrants learn English and pursue education. The Miguel Hernandez Language Bridge Foundation, Johnny announced to his stunned management team 3 days later. "We're going to fund it entirely from the album proceeds." The record executives thought Johnny had lost his mind. Country music fans, they argued, weren't interested in multilingual albums. It was career suicide. Johnny's response became legendary in Nashville circles. "If my fans can't appreciate the beauty of human connection across cultures, then maybe I've been singing to the wrong people all these years." The album, titled Bridges, was released 8 months later. Miguel's voice, refined and trained by some of Nashville's best vocal coaches, blended seamlessly with Johnny's distinctive bass baritone. The opening track, Ring of Fire, in 9 languages, became an international sensation. But the real magic happened during the recording sessions. Johnny had initially planned to have Miguel record his parts separately, but when they performed together, something extraordinary occurred. Their voices, separated by age, culture, and background, found a harmony that neither man had ever experienced before. It was like watching 2 rivers merge into something greater than either could be alone, recalled producer Rick Rubin, who worked on the sessions. Miguel brought out a vulnerability in Johnny that we'd never heard before, and Johnny gave Miguel the confidence to let his true voice shine. The album debuted at number 3 on the country charts and number 7 on the Billboard 200. More importantly, it opened doors for other artists to explore cultural fusion in ways that had never been attempted before. Miguel left his janitor position to become a full-time consultant and performer, but he never forgot his roots. Every Tuesday evening, he returned to the Palmer House basement, not to work, but to visit with the current night shift staff, many of whom were immigrants like himself. The Miguel Hernandez Language Bridge Foundation grew beyond anyone's wildest expectations. To date, it has helped over 50,000 immigrants learn English and pursue educational opportunities. 15 community centers across the country bear Miguel's name. But perhaps the most profound impact was on Johnny Cash himself. Working with Miguel helped him understand that true artistry isn't about personal glory. It's about building bridges between human experiences. The collaboration marked the beginning of Johnny's most creatively fulfilling period, leading to the acclaimed American recording series that would define his final years. Johnny often said in later interviews that meeting Miguel saved his life in ways that had nothing to do with music. "I was drowning in my own self-pity that night," he reflected during his final television appearance. "Miguel showed me that dignity isn't about what you do for a living or how famous you are. It's about how you treat your gifts and how you use them to lift others up." Miguel, now 79 years old, still performs occasionally. His voice, though aged, carries the same emotional depth that stopped Johnny Cash in his tracks that November night in 1978. When asked about his friendship with the Man in Black, Miguel always says the same thing. Music is the universal language, but kindness is the universal translator. The Palmer House Hotel has preserved the basement hallway where Johnny and Miguel first met. A small plaque marks the spot where 2 vastly different lives intersected and changed the course of music history. Hotel guests can take guided tours, and many report feeling moved to tears when they hear the story told in the exact location where it happened. Today, as we face increasing divisions across cultural and linguistic lines, the story of Johnny Cash and Miguel Hernandez reminds us that our differences aren't obstacles to overcome, they're gifts to be shared. In a world that often focuses on what separates us, their friendship proved that genuine human connection can bridge any gap. Their collaboration produced more than just beautiful music. It created a template for how artists from different backgrounds can honor each other's traditions while creating something entirely new. It showed that fame and fortune pale in comparison to the richness that comes from recognizing the dignity and gifts in every person we meet. So the next time you encounter someone whose story you don't know, whose language you don't speak, whose struggles you can't imagine, remember Johnny and Miguel. Remember that the person cleaning your office building might be a former university professor. The taxi driver might speak 6 languages. The grocery store clerk might be a published poet in their native tongue. Everyone has a song to sing. Everyone has a bridge to build. The question is, are you listening carefully enough to hear it? What stories are waiting to be discovered in the people around you? What bridges are waiting to be built? Take a moment today to really see someone, to ask their story, to listen with the same open heart that Johnny Cash showed that night in a hotel basement. Because sometimes the most extraordinary encounters happen in the most ordinary places. And sometimes the people who change our lives forever are the ones we almost walk past without noticing. Subscribe to hear more stories of unexpected human connection, and let us know in the comments, what's the most surprising talent you've discovered in someone whose story you took the time to learn? Your answer might just inspire the next bridge waiting to be built.